I stood in the courthouse corridor, my hands trembling as I clutched the folder that would destroy everything my husband had built with his lies. Through the small window in the courtroom door, I could see him sitting next to his lawyer, relaxed, confident, probably thinking about what restaurant he'd take her to after he won. He had no idea what was about to hit him. He had no idea that the woman he'd dismissed as weak, naive, controllable, the woman whose life savings he'd stolen and given to his ex, had found every single receipt, every transfer, every text message, and most importantly, he had no idea that I'd found the account. The hidden account in his ex's name that held not just our money, but the evidence that would send both of them to prison. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before the story begins, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more exciting stories. Let me tell you how it all started. Let me tell you how a marriage I thought was built on love turned out to be nothing more than a long con, and how the man I trusted with everything didn't just betray me. He tried to erase me completely. My name is Catherine Marie Hartwell, and 2 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was 34 years old, living in Charleston, South Carolina, in a beautiful colonial-style home on Meeting Street that my grandmother had left me. The house had been in my family for 3 generations. White columns, wrap around porch, garden full of magnolia trees that bloomed every spring and filled the air with their heavy, sweet perfume. I'd wake up every morning to sunlight streaming through the tall windows, the smell of jasmine drifting in from the garden, and my husband Michael sleeping peacefully beside me. Michael. God, even his name used to make me smile. We'd been married for 8 years. We met at a charity auction when I was 26 and he was 30. I was representing my father's law firm. He was there with his real estate development company. He had this way of looking at me, like I was the only person in the room. Dark hair, blue eyes, a smile that seemed genuine and warm. He told me that night that he'd been watching me all evening, trying to work up the courage to talk to me. "You're so far out of my league," he said, and I laughed because I thought he was joking. He seemed so confident, so established, so sure of himself. We dated for 2 years. He was attentive, thoughtful, romantic in ways that didn't feel performative. He remembered little things, how I took my coffee, which flowers were my favorites, the name of my childhood dog. When he proposed, he did it in my grandmother's garden, under the magnolia tree where I used to play as a child. "I want to build a life with you here," he said. "In this house, in this city, with all the history and love that already lives in these walls." I thought I'd found my person. I thought I'd won some kind of lottery. The first few years were good. Really good. Michael's business was doing well. He was buying old properties around Charleston, renovating them, selling them for profit. I continued working at my father's firm, handling estate law, trusts, probate. We talked about having children someday, but we weren't in a rush. We had dinner parties with friends, took weekend trips to Savannah and Hilton Head, made love on Sunday mornings while rain pattered against the windows. Normal things. Happy things. My father died when I'd been married to Michael for 5 years. Sudden heart attack, no warning, just gone. It broke something in me that took months to heal. Dad had been my rock, my mentor. The person who taught me everything about integrity and justice and standing up for what was right. He'd built his law firm from nothing, earned the respect of everyone in Charleston's legal community, and raised me to believe that your word was your bond and your reputation was everything. The funeral was massive. Seems like half of Charleston showed up. I remember standing in the cemetery, feeling the South Carolina heat pressing down on me like a weight. The smell of fresh, turned earth and roses, Michael's hand on my shoulder. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're not alone." After Dad died, I inherited his share of the law firm, which my uncle bought out for $340,000. Combined with what Dad had left me directly, another $180,000, I suddenly had $520,000 in liquid assets, plus the house, which was already mine, worth at least $2 million. Michael and I decided to put the inheritance money in our joint savings account at Heritage Trust Bank. "This is our future," Michael said. "Our security. When we have kids, when we want to retire, when we need it, it's here. Safe." I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. The man who'd held me while I cried for my father. the man who'd promised to protect me. What I didn't know was that my father's death and my inheritance had changed something in Michael. Or maybe it hadn't changed anything at all. Maybe it had just revealed what had been there all along. The first sign that something was wrong came about 6 months after we deposited the inheritance. It was small, so small I almost didn't notice it. We were having breakfast on a Saturday morning in October. I was making scrambled eggs and toast, and I asked Michael if he wanted coffee. He was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, and he didn't respond. I asked again. Nothing. Just the tap, tap, tap of his thumbs on the screen, the smell of butter melting in the pan, the sound of birds chirping outside the window. Michael. What? He didn't look up. Do you want coffee? I already have some. He gestured vaguely at an empty mug on the table that he'd finished an hour ago. I poured myself a cup, carried the eggs to the table, sat down across from him. He was smiling at his phone, typing fast, completely absorbed. I watched him for a moment, feeling something cold settle in my chest. That smile. It wasn't the smile he gave me. It was softer, more excited, younger somehow. "Ooh, are you texting?" I tried to keep my voice light, casual, work. He finally looked up, and the smile disappeared so fast it was like watching a mask slide into place. "Just a client. Wants to see a property this afternoon. On Saturday. Real estate doesn't stop for weekends, Kat." He said it patiently, like he was explaining something simple to a child. "You know that." I did know that. So why did it feel like a lie? He finished his eggs quickly, kissed me on the forehead, a dry, perfunctory peck, and left for his showing. I heard his car pull out of the driveway, the crunch of gravel under tires, and then silence. I sat at the table with my cooling coffee, looking at the empty chair across from me, trying to figure out why I suddenly felt so alone in my own house. Over the next few months, things got worse, not dramatically worse, just gradually, steadily, quietly worse. Like a room that's slowly filling with water and you don't realize you're drowning until it's up to your neck. Michael started coming home late. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, sometimes after midnight. Work, he always said. "I'm closing deals, Kat. This is how we build our future." He smelled like perfume sometimes. Not my perfume, something floral and expensive, with notes of jasmine and vanilla that made my stomach turn. When I asked about it, he said one of his clients was a woman who wore too much fragrance and it must have rubbed off during a handshake. Plausible. Reasonable. He stopped touching me. Our Sunday morning routine disappeared. If I initiated sex, he'd make excuses, tired, stressed, had an early meeting. The last time we'd been intimate was, I couldn't even remember. 3 months. 4. He became critical. Little comments that seemed harmless but landed like tiny cuts. "Are you really wearing that? When I dress for a dinner party. Maybe you should skip dessert, Kat?" With a meaningful glance at my stomach. "God, you sound just like your father." When I expressed an opinion he disagreed with. That one especially hurt because he knew it would. Money started disappearing, not all at once. I'm not even sure when I first noticed, but I'd check our joint account, the one with my inheritance, and the balance would be lower than I expected. 4,000 gone here, 8,000 there. When I asked Michael about it, he had explanations that sounded reasonable: property repairs, business expenses, investment opportunities that couldn't wait. "I'm growing our wealth," he said. "You have to spend money to make money. Don't you trust me?" I did. I wanted to. So I ignored the voice in my head that was getting louder, the one that sounded like my father: "Check everything. Trust, but verify." Numbers don't lie. By April, almost a year after we deposited the inheritance, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I logged into our Heritage Trust account on my laptop, sitting at my desk in the home office with afternoon light slanting through the windows, the smell of magnolias drifting in from the garden. I expected to see around 40,000-80,000, maybe 40,000-50,000 if Michael had made some investments I didn't know about. The balance was 127,643.28. I stared at the number, blinked, refreshed the page. The number didn't change. Almost 400,000 was gone. My hands started shaking. I clicked through the transaction history, scrolling back months, transfers, dozens of them, all to an account I didn't recognize. External transfers to Park Avenue Capital Management LLC do 15,000, 22,000, over 30,000, 18,000. Over and over and over, the dates went back 10 months, starting just 2 months after we deposited my inheritance. The room felt too small suddenly. Too hot. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, could feel sweat breaking out on my upper lip despite the air conditioning. The magnolia smell that usually comforted me now made me nauseous. I called the number at the bottom of Michael's last transfer. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. A woman's voice, smooth and professional. "You've reached Park Avenue Capital Management. We're unable to take your call right now. Please leave a message and we'll get back to you within 24 hours. Something about that voice. Something familiar. I called Heritage Trust directly, asked to speak to a manager. A man named Robert Chen came on the line. I explained that I was seeing transfers I didn't authorize and needed information about where the money went. Mrs. Hartwell, those transfers were all initiated by your husband, who is a joint account holder with full authorization. He's been moving funds to an investment account registered under Park Avenue Capital Management, LLC. The registered owner of that LLC is..." I heard him typing. "Ms. Diana Reeves." The world tilted. Diana Reeves, Michael's ex-girlfriend. The woman he'd dated for 3 years before he met me. The woman he'd told me was crazy and obsessive, and thank God I got away from her. The woman I'd met exactly once, at a grocery store 2 years into my marriage, who'd looked at me with something like pity and said, "Good luck, sweetie, you're going to need it." I'd asked Michael about that encounter. He'd laughed it off. See what I mean? Crazy, just ignore her. But she wasn't crazy. She was an accountant. A forensic accountant, actually, who specialized in tracking financial fraud. And my husband had been transferring my inheritance, my father's legacy, my security, my future, into an account with her name on it. I sat in that office for 20 minutes, unable to move. The sun that had been bright and warm now felt harsh, exposing. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, each second impossibly loud. Tick, tick. The smell of magnolias was cloying, suffocating. My mouth tasted like copper, like I'd bitten my tongue. I needed to be sure. Needed to know this wasn't some terrible misunderstanding. Maybe Diana just managed investments and Michael had hired her for legitimate business reasons. Maybe there was an explanation that made sense. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. I went upstairs to our bedroom. Michael's home office was next door. He'd converted what was supposed to be a nursery into his workspace. He always kept it locked when he wasn't there, said he had sensitive client information. I'd respected that. Trusted that. I'd never been good at picking locks, but desperation makes you creative. I used a bobby pin and a YouTube tutorial I pulled up on my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pin steady. It took 15 minutes of fumbling, my heart racing every time I heard a sound from outside, certain Michael would come home and find me breaking into his office like a thief in my own house. The lock finally clicked. The office smelled like his cologne, sandalwood and bergamot and something else. That perfume, jasmine and vanilla. It was stronger in here, like she'd been in this room, in this house, in this space that was supposed to be ours. His desk was neat, organized. I started with the drawers. Files full of property listings, contracts, nothing unusual. Then I found a locked drawer at the bottom. I used the same bobby pin technique, and this time it only took 5 minutes. Inside was a laptop I'd never seen before. A sleek silver MacBook, no password protection. I opened it and it woke immediately to the desktop. The screen was full of folders with names like Project Diana, Future Plans, Exit Strategy, Property Transfer Documents. I clicked on Project Diana first. My hands were numb now, my whole body cold despite the warm spring air coming through the window. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Michael and Diana, at restaurants. On vacation was that Turks and Caicos. We were supposed to go there for our anniversary, but he'd canceled last minute because of work. In bed. Jesus Christ, in bed. Some of the photos were taken in hotels, but others were taken here. In this house. In our bedroom. In my grandmother's house. There were screenshots of text conversations. Diana can't wait till she's finally gone, and we can stop sneaking around. Michael soon, baby. Once I have all the money transferred, we'll have enough to disappear together. Diana, you're sure she won't figure it out? Michael Cat? Please. She's too trusting, too naive. She believes everything I tell her. Her father spoiled her stupid. Diana, poor little rich girl lol. Michael not so rich anymore. Almost done transferring everything. Just another few months. The date on that conversation was 3 weeks ago. I opened Exit Strategy. Next. Inside was a document that laid out their entire plan. Michael had been systematically transferring my inheritance to Diana's LLC, which was actually just a shell company she'd set up. The money was then being moved to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Once the transfer was complete, Michael was planning to file for divorce, claiming I'd been emotionally unstable since my father's death. He had documentation to support this. Fabricated emails from a therapist I'd never seen, journal entries I'd never written, witness statements from people I'd never met. The plan was for him to get the house in the divorce settlement by arguing I was mentally unfit. Then he and Diana would sell it, take the $2 million, combine it with the stolen inheritance money, and move to Costa Rica, where Diana had already purchased a beach property under a different name. They'd been planning this for over a year. Since before my father died, they'd just been waiting for the right moment, the right windfall to make it worth the effort. I wasn't a wife to him. I was a mark, a target, a bank account with a pulse. I don't remember closing the laptop or leaving his office. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom, back against the wall, arms wrapped around my knees. The late afternoon sun was making patterns on the hardwood floor through the lace curtains my grandmother had hung 50 years ago. I could hear the grandfather clock downstairs chiming 6 o'clock. Each chime felt like a hammer blow. 8 years. 8 years of my life. How long had he been planning this? Had he ever loved me at all, or was I always just the woman with the inheritance potential? Had he targeted me specifically, known about my father's wealth, seen me as nothing more than an investment with a good return? I thought about our wedding. The vows he'd spoken with tears in his eyes. The way he'd held my hand when my father gave me away, squeezed it 3 times, our code for, I love you. Had that all been performance? Had he been thinking about my father's money even then, calculating how long he'd have to wait? I thought about the nights I'd comforted him when his business was struggling. The time I'd signed a loan to help him buy a property. The money I'd given him freely, happily, because I thought we were building something together. I thought about how he'd held me at my father's funeral. Whispered, I've got you. And all the while, he was already planning how to take everything my father had left me. The betrayal was so complete, so total, that my brain couldn't fully process it. It felt like reality had split open, and I was looking into some alternate universe where everything I'd believed was a lie. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael, working late again. Don't wait up. I stared at the message. Imagined him with her. In some hotel room or maybe even her apartment, laughing about how stupid I was, how easy it had been to fool me. Planning their escape while I sat here in the ruins of everything I'd thought was real. I should have been angry. I wanted to be angry. Anger felt powerful, righteous, justified, but all I felt was empty, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside my chest and removed everything vital and left just the shell of me behind. I stayed on that floor until it got dark, until the magnolia smell faded, and all I could smell was his cologne still clinging to my clothes from when he'd kissed my forehead that morning. Until I couldn't see the patterns of light anymore, just shadows. When I finally stood up, my legs were stiff, my back ached. My eyes burned from crying without tears. That strange dry sobbing that comes when you're too shocked for actual tears. I went downstairs to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, stood at the sink drinking it while looking out at the dark garden. The magnolia tree was just a black shape against the slightly lighter sky. I thought about my father, about what he would say if he knew, about how he'd trusted Michael, welcomed him into the family, put his arm around him at the wedding and called him son. I thought about my grandmother, who'd left me this house because she'd believed I would fill it with love and family and joy. And I thought about the woman I'd been that morning, the woman who'd made eggs and asked about coffee and tried to hold together a marriage that had never existed. That woman was gone. She died somewhere between reading those texts and understanding the full scope of the betrayal. What I didn't know was that the worst was yet to come. Michael came home after midnight. I was sitting in the living room in the dark, still wearing the same clothes from earlier. I heard his car in the driveway, his key in the lock, his footsteps in the hallway. He saw me sitting there and jumped. "Jesus, Cat! You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" I turned on the lamp beside me. The sudden light made him squint. I looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to see what I'd been missing all these years. The calculation in his eyes, the smile that was just slightly too practiced. The way he was already shifting his weight, preparing his explanations. Where were you? My voice sounded strange, flat, like it was coming from underwater. I told you. Work, I had to. Where were you really? Something flickered across his face. Annoyance. I just said, were you with Diana? The flicker became a flash. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion so perfectly performed I would have believed it if I hadn't seen the evidence. Deanna. My ex? Why would I, Kat? What's going on? I found the laptop. I saw everything. The mask dropped. Just for a second, but I saw it. The real Michael underneath. Cold, calculating, almost bored. Then the mask came back and he laughed. Actually laughed. Kat, I don't know what you think you found, but $393,000. That's how much you've stolen from our account and transferred to Diana's LLC. I called the bank. I saw the transaction history. I read your text messages. I saw your exit strategy folder where you planned to have me declared mentally unstable so you could take the house and sell it. My voice was still flat, but my hands were shaking. I clasped them together in my lap. I saw photos of you with her, in hotels, in our bed, in my grandmother's house. He stared at me, 5 seconds, 10. Then he sat down on the sofa across from me, leaned back, crossed one ankle over his knee. Casual, comfortable. Like we were discussing what to have for dinner. Okay, he said. You found out. So what? So what? So what? I repeated. What are you going to do, Kat? Go to the police. It's a joint account. I'm legally authorized to move that money. Go to a lawyer. Sure, file for divorce. You'll spend years in court and thousands in legal fees just to get half of what's left, which isn't much. And good luck proving any of this. Diana's LLC is legitimate. The transfers were legal, and your signature is on every joint account document. My signature. He smiled. You're not very careful with your paperwork, Kat. You leave things lying around. And your signature isn't that hard to forge. I've been practicing for years. The room tilted again. Years. He'd been planning this for years. The house, as in your name, yes. For now. But when we divorce, it becomes marital property subject to division. And when my very expensive lawyer presents evidence of your mental instability, the fake therapy sessions, the emotional breakdowns, the irrational behavior, the court will likely give me majority control or force a sale. Either way, I get my share. Diana and I already have a buyer lined up. Cash sale? $3 million. Should close within 60 days of the divorce being finalized. He was explaining it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, like he was describing a business transaction, which I guess to him, that's all it had ever been. Why? I heard myself ask. Did you ever? Was any of it real? He tilted his head, considering. You were nice enough, pretty, good in bed at least at first. But real, Kat, come on. You're a trust fund baby who got handed everything. Your father gave you a career. Your grandmother gave you a house. You've never had to work for anything real in your life. You're soft. Weak. Knave. Diana and I, we're the same kind of people. We're survivors. We do what it takes. I loved you. I know. He said it without emotion. That's what made it easy. I wanted to scream. To throw something. To hurt him the way he was hurting me. But I just sat there, hands clasped, voice flat. Feeling my heart break into pieces so small I'd never be able to put them back together. I want you out of my house. He laughed again. Your house. It's marital property, Kat. I have as much right to be here as you do. More, actually, since you're clearly unstable. He stood up, stretched like he was tired from a long day. I'm going to bed. We can discuss logistics tomorrow. Diana thinks we should file next week. Get the ball rolling. The sooner we start, the sooner it's over. He walked past me toward the stairs, paused, turned back. Oh, and Kat, if you try to withdraw any of the remaining money from the joint account, I'll know immediately and I'll freeze everything. If you try to change the locks, I'll call the police and show them my lease agreement. Yes, I made sure my name is on the house documents, even though you don't remember signing them. If you try to fight this, I will destroy you. Publicly, completely. I'll make sure everyone in Charleston knows that Catherine Hartwell is an unstable, vindictive woman who tried to ruin her innocent husband's life because she couldn't handle being left. He smiled. That same warm, genuine-looking smile that had fooled me for 8 years. Get a good night's sleep. You're going to need it. Then he went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. A minute later, water running in the bathroom. Then silence. I sat in that living room until dawn, watching the windows slowly lighten from black to gray to pale gold, listening to the birds start their morning songs, smelling the magnolias through the open window, that smell I'd loved my entire life, that now made me feel sick. Little did I realize that within 24 hours I would lose even more than I already had. Michael filed for divorce the next afternoon. I know because his lawyer called me at my office at the law firm, my uncle's firm now, and informed me that I was being served. The papers arrived by courier an hour later. I read through them in my office with the door closed, the afternoon sun making everything too bright, the smell of coffee from the break room making my stomach turn. The allegations were exactly what Michael had described: mental instability, emotional breakdowns, irrational behavior requiring professional intervention. There were exhibits attached. Forged journal entries describing suicidal thoughts I'd never had. Letters from a psychiatrist I'd never seen recommending medication I'd never taken. Emails to Michael begging him not to leave me, threatening to hurt myself if he did. Emails I'd never written. It was masterful, really. Thorough. Convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I'd believe it myself. The next attack came that evening. I was home alone. Michael had packed a bag that morning and left, saying he was staying with a friend, for his own safety. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to figure out what to do next when I heard a knock at the door. It was a police officer. Two of them, actually. A man and a woman. Both looking at me with that particular expression cops get when they're dealing with someone they think might be dangerous. Mrs. Hartwell, we need to ask you some questions about an incident reported by your husband. The incident was another fabrication. Michael had gone to the police claiming I'd attacked him that morning, thrown objects at him, threatened him with a knife. He had bruises to prove it, self-inflicted. Obviously, but how could I prove that? He had witnesses, his business partner and the partner's wife, who would swear they'd heard me screaming threats when they'd stopped by that morning, except they hadn't stopped by. I'd been alone all morning. The police didn't arrest me, but they took a report, made notes, told me a restraining order was being filed and I should expect to be served. They suggested I seek help for my anger issues. After they left, I stood in my hallway, my grandmother's hallway, with the family photos on the walls, the antique side table, the Persian runner she'd bought in 1965, and felt reality slipping further away. How was this happening? How had I become the villain in my own life? The next day, I went to the bank to check on our joint account. The remaining $127,643.28 was gone, completely emptied. When I asked the teller what happened, she looked uncomfortable. Your husband closed the account this morning, ma'am. He provided documentation showing he had sole authority due to your mental health status. There was a court order. There's no court order. We just filed for divorce yesterday. There hasn't been a hearing. She looked even more uncomfortable. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just telling you what I was told. You'd need to speak with a manager. The manager told me the same thing. Showed me paperwork with what looked like a judge's signature. Later, I'd find out it was forged, but by then, the money was gone. Transferred to another of Diana's accounts, and from there, who knows where. I had $347 my personal checking account. That was it. Everything else was gone. I called my uncle, explained the situation, asked if the firm could represent me in the divorce. He was silent for a long moment. Then, Kat, I don't think that's a good idea. This sounds complicated, messy, and given your current state of mind. My current state of mind. Mike called me this morning. He's worried about you. Said you've been having episodes, that you attacked him, that you need help. He asked me to encourage you to seek treatment. Uncle James, he's lying. He's been stealing from me. He's forging documents. He's framing me. Kat, his voice was gentle, pitying. I know divorce is hard. I know you're hurting. But making wild accusations isn't going to help. Michael showed me some of the evidence, the journal entries, the emails. Honey, I think you need to talk to someone, a therapist. Maybe take some time off work. You don't believe me. I believe you're in pain. I believe you need help. I hung up, sat at my desk staring at the phone. My own uncle, my father's brother, the man who'd known me my entire life. And he believed Michael over me. That's when I understood how thoroughly Michael had planned this. He hadn't just stolen my money. He'd stolen my credibility, my reputation, my support system. He'd made me the crazy one, the unstable one, the one no one would believe, and it was working. The public humiliation came 3 days later. I'd gone to the country club for lunch with 2 friends, women I'd known for years, wives of my father's colleagues. I needed to talk to someone, needed to feel less alone. We met at the club's restaurant, a beautiful room overlooking the golf course. All white tablecloths and crystal glasses, and the smell of fresh flowers mixed with expensive perfumes. I just started to explain what was happening when I saw them, Michael and Diana, walking into the restaurant together, his hand on the small of her back, her laughing at something he'd said, touching his arm with casual intimacy. They saw me. I know they did. Michael's eyes met mine across the room, and he smiled, not the warm smile he'd used on me, but something colder, triumphant. They were seated 3 tables away, close enough that I could hear Diana's voice, could smell her perfume, jasmine and vanilla, the smell that had been in my house, in my bedroom, on my husband's clothes. I tried to focus on my friends, on the lunch I couldn't eat, but I could feel eyes on me. Other diners had noticed. Were looking back and forth between me and Michael and Diana, whispering. Then my credit card was declined. The waiter came back to our table, looking embarrassed. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but this card isn't going through. Do you have another?" I tried my other card. Also declined. Michael had canceled them. Of course he had. My friends went silent. One of them, Jessica, reached for her purse. "I'll get it." "No." I stood up, my face burning, my hands shaking. "I'm sorry. I need to go." I walked out of that restaurant with everyone watching. Felt their stares like physical touches. Heard the whispers starting before I even reached the door. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and tried to breathe. Tried to stop shaking, but the shaking got worse, turned into full-body tremors. My chest felt too tight. My vision was narrowing. I couldn't get enough air. I was having a panic attack, I realized distantly. My first ever. I heard a tap on my window. Michael. He'd followed me out. I rolled down the window because I was too disoriented to think of anything else. "You look upset, Kat." His voice was full of fake concern. "Are you okay to drive? Maybe I should take you home. Or better yet, to the hospital. You seem really unstable right now. Get away from me? There are people watching. You want to make a scene? Give me more ammunition." He leaned closer, and I could smell Diana's perfume on him. "Every time you act out, every time you make yourself look crazy, you're just making this easier for me. So please, keep going. Keep having your little breakdowns. Keep showing everyone who you really are." He straightened up, knocked twice on the roof of my car in mock salute, and walked back into the club. I sat there for 20 minutes before I could drive. When I finally got home, I found an eviction notice taped to my front door. Michael was suing to have me removed from the house on the grounds that I posed a danger to the property and to him. I'd lived in this house since I was 26. It had been in my family for 3 generations, and I was being evicted from it. That night, I sat in my grandmother's bedroom. I couldn't sleep in the room I'd shared with Michael and tried to figure out what to do. I had 3 of 847 in my bank account. No access to credit. No support from my family. Friends who were starting to believe Michael's version of events. A legal system that he'd already manipulated against me. I was alone. Completely, totally alone. And I was losing. The court hearing for the restraining order was a week later. Michael's lawyer was slick, expensive. The kind who wore custom suits and spoke in the measured tones of someone who never doubted they'd win. My lawyer was a public defender I'd been assigned after every private attorney in Charleston either refused to take my case or quoted fees I couldn't afford. Michael testified first, described me as increasingly unstable over the past year, prone to violent outbursts, resistant to seeking help. He presented his forged evidence, the journal entries, the emails, the therapy records. He had witnesses, his business partner and wife, both of whom testified they'd heard me threaten Michael. A neighbor who claimed I'd been acting strangely, leaving the house at odd hours, talking to myself in the garden, all lies, all carefully constructed, perfectly delivered lies. When it was my turn to testify, I tried to explain the truth. About the stolen money, the hidden accounts, Diana, the plan to take everything. I sounded hysterical even to my own ears. Desperate. exactly like someone who was unstable and making wild accusations. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel, gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. She listened to everything, reviewed the evidence, then delivered her ruling. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm granting a temporary restraining order requiring you to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Hartwell. Additionally, given the concerning evidence presented regarding your mental state, I'm ordering a psychiatric evaluation before any further proceedings. And pending that evaluation, I'm granting Mr. Hartwell's request for exclusive use of the marital residence. Mrs. Hartwell, you have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings and vacate the property. The courtroom tilted. That's my house. It was my grandmother's house. It's not marital property. It was mine before. Mrs. Hartwell, please don't make this more difficult. The property ownership is under dispute and will be resolved during divorce proceedings. For now, given the evidence of instability and potential for escalation, I believe this is the safest arrangement. My ruling stands, bang. The gavel came down. Just like that, I'd lost my home. I walked out of that courthouse in a daze. It was a beautiful May day, warm sun, blue sky, the smell of flowers from the garden boxes outside the building. People walking past with their coffee and their phones, living their normal lives, completely unaware that mine had just ended. Michael and Diana were waiting outside. I saw them before they saw me. Standing together on the courthouse steps, he had his arm around her waist. She was laughing. He kissed her temple, and she leaned into him. Comfortable and familiar and everything I'd thought we were. They saw me. Diana's smile got wider. Michael looked at me with something like pity. They got into his car, the BMW I'd helped him buy 2 years ago, and drove away. I stood on those courthouse steps and felt the last piece of my old self crumble to dust. I moved into a cheap motel on the outskirts of Charleston. The airport inn, $147 a night, with thin walls and a smell like industrial cleaner mixed with cigarette smoke that never went away. My room had a double bed with a synthetic comforter that crackled with static, a TV that only got basic cable, a bathroom with brown water stains and weak water pressure. The air conditioner rattled and dripped condensation into a bucket. I had to empty twice a day. I'd packed what I could in 72 hours. Clothes, some photos, books, my grandmother's jewelry box. Everything else, the furniture I'd grown up with, the artwork, the family heirlooms, stayed in the house. Michael's house now, at least temporarily. I spent my days applying for jobs I was overqualified for, trying to figure out how to survive on less than $4,000. My nights, I lay in that motel bed listening to the couple in the next room fight. The sound of cars on the highway, the distant wail of sirens, and tried to figure out what I'd done to deserve this. The psychiatric evaluation was humiliating. A court-appointed psychiatrist who'd clearly already read Michael's version of events, who asked questions designed to confirm instability rather than discover truth. I tried to stay calm, tried to explain rationally what had happened, but I could see her making notes that would probably say, paranoid, delusional, persecution complex. My friends stopped returning my calls. The women from the country club, the people I'd known for years, they'd all heard Michael's version now. Poor Michael, married to an unstable woman. Thank God he got out before she really hurt someone. My uncle stopped speaking to me entirely. I was completely, utterly alone. One night, about 3 weeks after I'd been evicted, I hit rock bottom. I was lying in that motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the air conditioner rattle, and I realized I had $847 left in my account. That was it. That was all that remained of my father's legacy. My grandmother's house, my 8-year marriage, my entire life. At $847, I thought about my father, about how disappointed he'd be. He'd always taught me to fight, to stand up for myself, to use the law to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. And I'd failed. I'd let Michael destroy me. Let him steal everything Dad had worked for, everything Grandma had built, everything I was supposed to protect and pass down to my own children someday. I thought about my grandmother, about how she'd trusted me with her home, her legacy, and I'd lost it to a con man and his accomplice. I thought about just giving up, letting Michael have it all, disappearing, starting over somewhere else as someone else, someone who'd never been Catherine Hartwell, someone who'd never been stupid enough to trust and love and believe in forever. I was so tired, so incredibly bone-deep tired. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke to sunlight streaming through the thin motel curtains and my phone ringing. I answered without checking who it was. Mrs. Hartwell. This is Margaret Chen from Low Country Trust and Estate Management. I'm calling about your father's estate. I sat up, confused. My father's estate was settled 2 years ago? His primary estate, yes. But we've recently completed probate on a secondary trust that your father established 18 years ago. It's been generating income this entire time. And the terms of the trust stipulate that it would only be disclosed to you in the event of certain triggering conditions. Those conditions have now been met. What conditions? I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone. Could you come to our office this afternoon? Say 2 o'clock. I'll explain everything then. I almost didn't go. It felt like another trap, another way for the universe to kick me while I was down. But I had nothing else to do and nowhere else to be. So at 2 o'clock I walked into the offices of Low Country Trust and Estate Management, a sleek building downtown that smelled like leather and expensive coffee. Margaret Chen was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional manner. She showed me to a conference room and pulled out a file that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Your father established this trust when you were 16 years old, she explained. It was funded with 250,000 initially, invested conservatively over the years. The trust terms were very specific. You were only to be informed of its existence if you experienced significant financial hardship coupled with betrayal by a spouse or partner. Your father included a letter that explains his reasoning. She handed me an envelope. My father's handwriting on the front for Catherine, if her ship is sinking. My hands shook as I opened it. The paper inside smelled faintly like his cologne, that woody, familiar scent I'd forgotten I remembered. My dearest Cat. If you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong. You've been betrayed by someone you trusted with your heart and your life, and you're facing financial ruin because of it. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I hoped you'd never need this safety net. I hoped I was just being a paranoid old lawyer who'd seen too many cases of good people destroyed by those they loved. But if you are reading this, then my paranoia was justified, and I want you to know several things. First, this is not your fault. You are not stupid or weak or naive for trusting someone. You are kind and good and open-hearted, and those are virtues, not flaws. The fault lies entirely with the person who exploited your trust. Second, you are stronger than you know. You're my daughter. You have my stubbornness, my sense of justice, and my refusal to let bullies win. You're down right now, but you're not out. Not even close. Third, this trust currently holds approximately 680,000. This money is yours and yours alone, held in a trust that cannot be touched by any spouse, any creditor, any legal proceeding. I set it up this way specifically to protect you in a situation like this. Use this money to fight back, Cat. Hire the best lawyers. Hire investigators. Expose whoever hurt you. Take back what's yours. And when you win, not if, when. Use what you've learned to help others who find themselves in the same position. I wish I could be there to help you through this. I wish I could be there to see you rise from these ashes and become even stronger than you were before. But since I can't, know that I'm proud of you. Always have been, always will be. You're going to survive this. You're going to win. Because you're a Hartwell and we don't quit. I love you, sweetheart. Now go show them what you're made of. Dad, I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it down on the table, and I cried for the first time since finding out about Michael's betrayal. Real tears, not the dry sobs of shock. I cried for my father, who'd loved me enough to protect me even after his death. I cried for the innocent woman I'd been 3 weeks ago. And I cried with relief, because I wasn't alone after all. My father was still watching over me. When I finally stopped crying, Margaret was waiting patiently with a box of tissues and a small smile. The current value of the trust is $683,475, she said. I have the paperwork ready for you to sign, and the funds can be transferred to a new personal account, not joint, solely in your name, within 24 hours. They can't touch this money. Michael, his lawyers, no one? No one. It's an irrevocable trust with very specific protections built in. Your father was extremely thorough. Even if someone tried to claim it in divorce proceedings, the trust structure makes it legally impossible. What I didn't know was that this money would be just the beginning. that it would give me not just the means to fight back, but the clarity to see exactly how to destroy the people who tried to destroy me. But the worst was yet to come for Michael and Diana. The first thing I did was check out of the airport inn and check into a decent hotel downtown. The Wentworth, a historic property with clean rooms, comfortable beds, and staff who didn't look at me with pity. I took a shower that had real water pressure, changed into clean clothes that didn't smell like motel, and sat on the bed with my father's letter in one hand and my phone in the other. The second thing I did was call the best divorce attorney in Charleston, Preston Burke, a man with a reputation for being ruthless, strategic, and expensive. His retainer was $50,000. I didn't hesitate. I met with him the next day in his corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Preston was in his early 60s, silver-haired, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I told him everything. Showed him the laptop I'd stolen from Michael's office before leaving the house. Yes, I'd taken it. The only smart thing I'd done in this entire nightmare. Showed him the screenshots of texts between Michael and Diana, the exit strategy documents, the photos, everything. Preston listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he sat back in his leather chair and smiled. It was not a kind smile. Mrs. Hartwell, your husband and his accomplice have committed multiple felonies. Wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud. We're not just talking about a messy divorce. We're talking about criminal charges that could send both of them to prison. Can we prove it? Can we prove that he systematically stole nearly $400,000 from you through fraudulent means, forged your signature on legal documents, and conspired with his ex-girlfriend to frame you as mentally unstable while planning to steal your property? Yes. We can absolutely prove that. He tapped the laptop. This is a gift. This is them writing their own confession. What do we do first? First, we file an emergency motion to freeze all of Diana's accounts, personal and business. We present evidence of the fraudulent transfers and get a court order preventing any further movement of funds. Second, we file a criminal complaint with the Charleston Police Department and the FBI, since wire fraud across state lines is a federal offense. Third, we refile your divorce case with a new narrative, supported by actual evidence, showing that you're the victim of fraud, not an unstable spouse. And fourth, he smiled again, we sue them both. Civil suits for fraud, theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and anything else I can think of. By the time we're done, they won't have enough money left to buy coffee. How long will this take? Months. Maybe a year. But Mrs. Hartwell, I promise you this. We will win. You have the evidence, you have the resources, and you have me. They're going to regret ever hearing your name. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. And underneath the hope, something colder and harder. I felt ready for war. We moved fast. Within 48 hours, Preston had filed emergency motions with the court. The judge who'd granted Michael's restraining order had to recuse herself. Turned out Michael's lawyer had taken her to lunch twice in the weeks before our hearing, something that came out when Preston started digging. The new judge was a man named Harold Chen, no relation to Margaret Chen, but equally thorough and detail-oriented. When Judge Chen saw the evidence, the laptop, the texts, the fake documents, his expression went from neutral to thunderous. Mr. Burke, these are serious allegations. Yes, Your Honor. And we have serious evidence to support them. Michael's expensive lawyer tried to object, tried to claim the laptop was stolen property and inadmissible. But Preston was ready. Your Honor, Mrs. Hartwell took her husband's laptop from their shared marital home while she still had legal access to that home. She had reason to believe it contained evidence of financial fraud against her. This is not theft, this is self-preservation. And I'd like to point out that opposing counsel hasn't denied the authenticity of any of the documents on that laptop. He's simply arguing we shouldn't be allowed to use them, which suggests he knows exactly what they prove. Judge Chen ordered an immediate forensic accounting of all accounts associated with Michael and Diana. He froze Diana's LLC and personal accounts pending investigation. He granted a temporary restraining order preventing either Michael or Diana from accessing, selling, or transferring any property or assets. And he ordered both of them to appear in court in 2 weeks for an evidentiary hearing. Mr. Burke, If what you're alleging is true, this is one of the more egregious cases of marital fraud I've seen in 30 years on the bench. I'm taking this very seriously. That was a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, the FBI had opened an investigation. By Monday morning, both Michael and Diana had been interviewed by federal agents. By Tuesday, the story had leaked to the press. I learned about the news coverage from Preston, who called me at the hotel with barely suppressed excitement in his voice. "Turn on Channel 5 News. You're going to want to see this." I turned on the TV in time to catch the tail end of a segment. Real estate developer Michael Hartwell and forensic accountant Diana Reeves are under investigation for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and identity theft. The alleged victim is Hartwell's wife, Charleston attorney Catherine Hartwell, daughter of the late James Hartwell of the prestigious Hartwell and Associates law firm. Sources say the investigation involves hundreds of thousands of dollars allegedly stolen from Mrs. Hartwell through elaborate financial manipulation and forged documents. Both Hartwell and Reeves deny any wrongdoing, but FBI agents were seen entering their properties this morning with search warrants. We'll continue to follow this developing story. My phone started ringing immediately. Friends I hadn't heard from in weeks, colleagues from the law firm, people who'd believed Michael's version of events, suddenly wanting to know if I was okay, if there was anything they could do. Expressing shock and outrage on my behalf, the same people who'd ghosted me 3 weeks ago were now falling over themselves to support me. I didn't answer any of the calls. I sat in my hotel room and watched the news cycle pick up the story, watched Michael's face appear on screen, his professional headshot from his company website, looking confident and successful, and felt something shift inside me. This was what public exposure felt like. This was what happened when the truth came out and everyone who'd believed the lies suddenly had to confront reality. Michael was about to lose everything. His reputation, his business, his freedom. And he was going to lose it all publicly, the same way he'd tried to humiliate me publicly. The wheel was turning, and I was no longer underneath it. The evidentiary hearing 2 weeks later was packed. Reporters, spectators, people who'd read about the case and wanted to see how it played out. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Preston, wearing a navy blue suit my father had bought me years ago, my hair pulled back, looking calm and professional even though my heart was racing. Michael and Diana sat at the defense table with their lawyers, both looking significantly less confident than they had at the last hearing. Michael had dark circles under his eyes. Diana kept fidgeting with her phone until the bailiff told her to put it away. Judge Chen took the bench and immediately got down to business. I've reviewed the evidence submitted by both parties, including the forensic accounting reports and the FBI's preliminary findings. I've also reviewed the laptop and its contents, which the defense has now acknowledged is authentic. Mr. Hartwell, Ms. Reeves, I'm going to give you both one opportunity to make a statement before I rule. Hartwell, you first. Michael stood, cleared his throat. Your Honor, I admit that mistakes were made. The transfers to Ms. Reeves' accounts were for legitimate business purposes that may have been improperly documented. Any suggestion that there was fraud or conspiracy is simply my wife's attempt to. Mr. Hartwell, I'm going to stop you right there. Judge Chen's voice was ice. I've read text messages between you and Ms. Reeves where you explicitly discuss transferring your wife's inheritance money for the purpose of taking it in the divorce. I've read documents labeled exit strategy, where you detail plans to have your wife declared mentally incompetent using fabricated evidence. I've seen forged journal entries, forged emails, and forged psychiatric records. These are not mistakes or improper documentation. These are crimes. He turned to Diana. Ms. Reeves, as a forensic accountant, you know exactly what constitutes financial fraud. You helped design and execute this scheme. You created shell companies specifically to hide stolen funds. You knew these transfers were illegal. Diana's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client. Sit down. Counsel. I haven't asked you to speak yet. Judge Chen looked back at Michael and Diana. Here's what's going to happen. I'm issuing a court order requiring both of you to return every penny of the approximately $393,000 transferred from Mrs. Hartwell's joint account to Ms. Reeves' accounts within 30 days. I'm also ordering you to pay Mrs. Hartwell's legal fees, which currently total, he glanced at a document, though $87. I'm granting Mrs. Hartwell immediate and exclusive possession of the marital home, which was hers prior to the marriage and which you, Mr. Hartwell, never had any legitimate claim to. I'm dissolving the restraining order against Mrs. Hartwell, and I'm issuing a new restraining order preventing either of you from contacting her in any way. He wasn't done. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. The evidence is overwhelming, and I believe both of you need to face criminal consequences for your actions. And Ms. Reeves, I'll be notifying the South Carolina Board of Accountancy about your conduct. I suspect your license will be revoked. The courtroom was silent. I could hear the scratch of a reporter's pen on paper, the whir of the air conditioning, my own heartbeat. Do either of you have anything else to say? Michael's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client doesn't have access to those funds anymore. They've been invested, moved, then uninvest them and move them back. You have 30 days. If the money isn't returned in full, I'll hold both Mr. Hartwell and Ms. Reeves in contempt, and they can consider making their statements from jail. We're adjourned. Bang. The gavel came down. And just like that, I'd won. Leaving the courtroom felt surreal. Reporters tried to ask me questions, but Preston guided me past them with a firm, Mrs. Hartwell has no comment at this time. I got into his car, and we drove back to his office in silence. Inside his conference room, Preston poured 2 glasses of bourbon, even though it was 2 in the afternoon. You did it, he said. You won. We won, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. True. But you're the one who took that laptop. You're the one who had the evidence. You're the one who refused to give up even when everything looked hopeless. He raised his glass. To your father, who was smart enough to protect you. And to you for being strong enough to fight back. We drank. The bourbon burned going down, but it was a good burn. A celebratory burn. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait for them to return the money. If they don't, which they probably won't because Diana's already spent a good chunk of it, we seize their assets. Diana's house, Michael's business, their cars, bank accounts, everything. We liquidate it all until we recover what's owed to you. And then the criminal trials begin. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years in federal prison. With the evidence we have, I'd say they're each looking at 5 to 7 years minimum, plus fines, plus restitution. And if they try to run, then they'll be fugitives, and federal marshals will hunt them down. These aren't charges you run from, Catherine. These are charges that follow you anywhere in the world. He smiled. They're trapped. Completely, totally trapped. And they have no one to blame but themselves. Michael and Diana didn't return the money in 30 days. They didn't have it. Diana had already spent nearly $200,000 on the Costa Rica property, a new car, and various luxury purchases. The rest was scattered across accounts they'd hoped would be hard to trace. Judge Chen held them in contempt. They each spent 3 days in jail before posting bond. Preston's team went after their assets methodically. Diana's house in Mount Pleasant sold. Michael's BMW and Diana's Mercedes seized and sold. Michael's stake in his real estate company bought out by his business partners who wanted nothing to do with the scandal. Diana's client list disappeared overnight when word got out about her criminal investigation. Within 3 months, we'd recovered 427,000, more than they'd originally stolen because we'd taken everything they had. The criminal trials were scheduled for the following spring. Both Michael and Diana were indicted on 14 counts each: wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice for attempting to destroy evidence once they knew they were under investigation. Their lawyers tried to negotiate plea deals. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Martinez, laughed in their faces. You stole nearly 400,000, framed your victim as mentally unstable, and tried to steal her house. You fabricated psychiatric records, forged legal documents, and planned to flee the country. These are not the kind of charges we plea bargain. We're going to trial, and we're going to win, and you're both going to prison. The only question is for how long. Michael tried one last desperate move. He called me directly, violating the restraining order. I recorded the call. Chat, please. We can work this out. I'll pay back every penny. I'll give you the house. I'll give you everything. Just drop the criminal charges. Please, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You're not sorry you did it, Michael. You're sorry you got caught. Chat, I'm begging you. Diana's pregnant. If we both go to prison, Diana's pregnant. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Was it yours? Yes, we found out last week. Kat, please. Think about the baby. I'm thinking about the woman you tried to destroy. The woman whose life you stole. The woman whose father's legacy you tried to erase. That's who I'm thinking about. And she says no. No deals. No mercy. You're going to prison, Michael. Both of you. I hung up. Sent the recording to Preston and Angela Martinez. Michael was arrested again for violating the restraining order and held without bond until trial. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came a month later. I sat in the courtroom gallery, same seat I'd sat in when Judge Chen had first ruled in my favor. Michael and Diana stood before the judge, both looking smaller somehow, diminished. Judge Chen looked at them with something like disgust. Mr. Hartwell, Ms. Reeves, you didn't just commit fraud. You attempted to psychologically destroy another human being for financial gain. You fabricated evidence of mental illness. You tried to have your victim declared incompetent. You isolated her from her support system. You humiliated her publicly. This wasn't just theft. This was cruelty. He looked at Diana. Ms. Reeves, you used your expertise as a forensic accountant, knowledge meant to prevent fraud, to commit fraud. You betrayed your profession and your ethics. The fact that you're pregnant doesn't excuse your actions. You made these choices knowing the possible consequences. He looked at Michael. Mr. Hartwell, you stole from your wife. You betrayed every vow you made to her. You tried to take her home, her inheritance, her reputation, her sanity. And you showed no remorse until you were caught. Ms. Reeves, I sentence you to 6 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and restitution of $427,000 to Mrs. Hartwell. Mr. Hartwell, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and restitution of $427,000 to Mrs. Hartwell. Bang. The gavel came down one last time. Michael turned and looked at me. He mouthed something. It might have been, I'm sorry, or it might have been something else. I looked away. I didn't care anymore. They were let out in handcuffs. Diana was crying. Michael looked blank, shocked, like he still couldn't believe this was happening to him. I walked out of that courthouse into bright September sunshine. The air smelled like salt from the harbor and flowers from the garden boxes. I stood on the steps, the same steps where I'd watched Michael and Diana drive away 6 months ago, and breathed. It was over. It was finally over. 1 year later, I was sitting in my grandmother's garden under the magnolia tree, drinking coffee on a Saturday morning. The house was mine again, completely, legally, permanently mine. I'd changed the locks, had it blessed by a priest to get rid of any lingering negative energy, repainted the bedroom I'd shared with Michael, donated all his remaining possessions to charity. The magnolia tree was blooming, filling the air with that heavy, sweet perfume. It didn't make me sick anymore. It just smelled like home. My phone buzzed. A message from Jessica, one of the friends who disappeared during the worst of it, but had come back after the truth came out. She'd apologized, cried, explained she'd believed Michael because he was so convincing. I'd forgiven her. Life was too short to hold grudges against everyone. Coffee next week. Want to hear about your new case? I smiled. Yes, I had a new case. My first as a solo practitioner. I'd left my uncle's firm. That relationship was permanently damaged, and started my own practice specializing in fraud victims and financial abuse cases. I had 3 clients already, all referred by Preston. All women who'd been scammed by people they trusted. I was using what I'd learned to help others. Just like my father's letter had said I would. Michael was in FCI Bennettsville, a federal prison about 2 hours away. I'd heard through the grapevine that he was a model prisoner, quiet and cooperative. Diana had given birth to a baby girl in prison and was allowed to keep her for the first 18 months, before the child went to Diana's mother. I felt sorry for the baby, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for Diana. They'd each serve at least 5 years before being eligible for parole. They'd both lost everything, their freedom, their money, their reputations, their futures. Michael would never work in real estate again. Diana would never get her accounting license back. The punishment fit the crime. They'd tried to take everything from me, so they'd lost everything themselves. Poetic justice. I finished my coffee, went inside to my home office, and pulled up the files for next week's case. A woman named Sarah, whose husband had drained their retirement accounts and tried to convince her she had dementia. She'd found my name through a Google search. Read about my case, called me crying. I thought I was crazy, she'd said. He kept telling me I was forgetting things, losing things, that I was sick. But I wasn't. I was fine. He was gaslighting me while he stole our money. You're not crazy, I told her. And we're going to prove it. We're going to get your money back. And we're going to make sure he faces consequences. I promise. Now I was preparing for her case the way Preston had prepared for mine. Methodically, thoroughly. With the kind of attention to detail my father had taught me. I thought about Dad a lot these days. About his letter, his foresight, his love that had reached across death to save me. About how he'd taught me that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about restoration. About making victims whole again. I thought about my grandmother, whose house I'd saved, whose legacy I'd protected. I could feel her presence sometimes. In the smell of magnolias, in the afternoon light through the old windows, in the creak of the floorboards. She would have been proud. I thought about the woman I used to be, trusting, naive, believing in forever. That woman had died. But someone stronger had been born from her ashes. Someone who knew that trust had to be earned, that red flags should never be ignored, that love without respect was worthless. Someone who would never be anyone's mark again. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.